King Asgore is one of the most pivotal characters in Undertale's story, but also one of the most reviled within the fanbase. Though some appreciate the subversive nature of his character and how tragedy led him to make terrible choices for the sake of his people, others lambast him for his crimes, harass his fans, and ultimately view the character purely in bad faith. I think it's fine to dislike a character, but at the same time I feel as though Asgore is grossly misunderstood and overshadowed by more popular characters, to the point where he's even absent from a lot of official merchandise and materials where more minor characters get the spotlight. So in this video, I'd like to give the Monster King his dues and explore his depth, development, and even a little dash of Deltarune. Our first look at Asgore is in the Undertale intro, where his silhouetted figure is put in contrast to the humans as the story of the human and monster war unfolds. He's depicted as large and imposing, with huge horns and a massive trident. That's all we learn, however, until near the end of the ruins. In Toriel's house, we learn how the monsters after the war journeyed far into the underground until they settled on a place to call home, which their king called, well, home. This establishes Asgore as being terrible with names, and is the first lighthearted trait we learn about him. However, when you try to leave the ruins, Toriel warns of how previous humans have died, how Asgore will kill you if you proceed. His name is spoken in red. It's very imposing. This threatening image of the king is all you have to work with until you reach Snowdin and learn that he named their capital city New Home. And then Papyrus talks about how he's a big, fuzzy pushover who is really kind and would gladly let Frisk leave if they just ask. It's a stark contrast to what Toriel stated before, and it's further highlighted because Papyrus refers to him in yellow, in contrast to Toriel's red. The Papyrus phone calls only add to the softer image of his character, too. While Papyrus gushes about how much kids love deadly spikes, he mentions that the king wants to ban them as they are unsafe for children. He also wants to be rid of the precarious bridge mandate for similar safety-related reasons, which shows that Asgore cares a lot about the safety of the youth and his people. In Waterfall, we learn of the tragedies of the human and monster war, which Asgore lived through. Humanity declared war very suddenly out of fear that monsters would take their souls. The war was one-sided, with many monsters dying while no human souls were claimed. While Asgore himself is not spoken of in depth, the powerful souls of boss monsters are first alluded to here, which will be important later. Monster Kid discusses a time when Asgore came to their class to teach a lesson on responsibility, and even donated his own flowers to the class. This once again shows a desire to guide the younger generation on the right path. Gerson then tells a little more about Asgore, including giving him the nickname King Fluffy Buns. He describes Asgore as a friendly, happy-go-lucky guy who likes to walk around the kingdom and mingle with his people. In the epilogue, he adds that the Fluffy Bun nickname came from a time when Toriel called him an affectionate pet name that got picked up on a microphone, and then Asgore took it with stride and proclaimed himself King Fluffy Buns to all. This shows a good-humored side of Asgore. Later, Undyne speaks of Asgore in a more intimidating light, mentioning how he will take 7 human souls to become a god and free monsters and wipe out humanity. Notably, she refers to Asgore in both yellow and red text. Then, in battle, she boasts about how no human has ever made it past Asgore. Note, past, not to. But in her date, she reveals more of the softer side of Asgore, first by pointing out his love of golden flower tea and then calling him a total weenie. Sorta. She describes a time where she tried to fight Asgore, but he dodged every blow, but eventually took her on as a student. On the day she finally knocked him down, he was incredibly proud of her and eventually appointed her head of the guard. However, perhaps the most striking thing she reveals is that Asgore probably doesn't want to fight Frisk. She begs Frisk to talk to Asgore to find another solution. Thus, by this point, we have a much clearer image of the true Asgore. And then we have the Mettaton quiz, where it's revealed that Alphys has a huge crush on him and calls him Mr. Dreamy. Bratty and Catty later reveal that Asgore had a deep interest in soul research and how Mettaton was the reason Alphys got appointed as the head scientist. Unfortunately, unlike Undyne, they are still totally hyped for the destruction of humanity, which demonstrates how eager the average monster is for Asgore to seize the final soul, and the difficult situation he has placed himself in. Before heading to New Home, we also learn that Asgore is a boss monster, one of the few monsters whose souls can persist briefly after death. It turns out that the power of a human and monster soul is required to leave, thus fighting Asgore is required to cross the barrier. This presents a moral dilemma that grows even worse when you learn about him in New Home. From the very beginning, New Home characterizes Asgore impeccably. The entire area is in grayscale, which is greatly evocative of both the past and a sort of emptiness and lack of color in his life. When you first enter his home, you're immediately hit with familiarity, as the layout is identical to Toriel's house, minus the locks on the stairway. The stairs have a sign urging visitors to look for the keys and pointing out where to find them. This shows that Asgore is open to anyone who wishes to visit him. There are many potted golden flowers throughout as well, and once you pass the chain, you'll find a calendar with a date in 21X circled. In the Genocide run, you learn that that is the date that Kara came to the Underground. Unlike Toriel's home, the fireplace is dull. The chair looks as though it hasn't been used in some time. The tools are not filed down. The kitchen contains more telling traits, a trash bin filled with crumpled up butterscotch pie recipes that shows how desperately he's tried to recapture the missing piece of his life. The fridge is full of unopened snail containers, which further calls back to Toriel and her own love of snails, while there's a note welcoming guests to take whatever they like. Already, it's clear that Asgore is a kindly king, but as you explore the home, monster visitors recount the tragic tale. Long ago, a human fell into the underground and was found by the monster prince Azrael. The little prince brought the human to his home, where Asgore and his wife took them in, and the underground was full of hope. The human even became part of the family, and formed a close, sibling-like bond with the young prince. As you explore more of the house, you find a children's bedroom with unopened gift boxes. A happy family photo sits on the shelf. Striped shirts fill the wardrobe. Childish artwork lines the walls. The beds are perfectly made, even though no one has used them in a long time. More golden flowers fill the hall. The next room is closed for renovations, a clear parallel to a similar room within Toriel's home. The next room is Asgore's own bedroom, which sheds further light on this lonely king. He has a trophy for the Nose Nuzzle Championships of '98, first place. His clothes drawer has many different clothing, including a hand-knit sweater that says Mr. Dad Guy, likely made by Kara, the human child. His bureau holds a Santa Claus outfit, which calls back to earlier mentions of Santa from Papyrus in his date and the gifts outside in Snowdin Town. This further showcases Asgore's kind heart and how deeply he cares for his people and the younger generations. On his wall hangs macaroni art of a flower that his son made, while on his desk lies an open journal that says, "Nice day today," showing that he tries to have a cheery spirit. This is starkly contrasted with the tragic story that continues in the basement. The monsters reveal that one day Kara fell ill, and their dying wish was to see the golden flowers in their village. Upon their death, Azrael took their soul, went to the surface, and was attacked. Despite having immense power, he refused to fight back, and returned to the underground with a smile before crumbling to dust. Upon his death, Asgore was outraged and heartbroken. He had lost 2 children in a single night, and after centuries of banishment beneath the ground, humanity stole the kingdom's future away. And so he declared war on humanity in a fit of rage, claiming that he would take the human souls, cross the barrier, and enact vengeance. However, Toriel was disgusted, and left to the ruins in order to protect any humans that fell down. Yet, Asgore's actions restored hope to the kingdom. Many monsters anticipate the final soul with excitement. And so, when Asgore finally appears on screen, it's a rather tense moment to say the least. First, there's his voice. The moment you hear it, it might click. You've heard it before, on the Game Over screen. There, he provided words of comfort and encouragement. Here, however, the context is strikingly different. He is friendly, but undeniably sad. He wishes he could simply play catch or make a cup of tea, but his people expect freedom. He has boxed himself in a cruel corner. He remains friendly despite the circumstances, and even gives Frisk every chance to turn back. He will not fight unless you want to. His small talk and hesitance show that he is trying to put this off for as long as possible, that he does not want to do this. Asgore will not fight until you are ready, and even then he remains cordial, even up to the moment that he smashes the mercy button. There's a lot you can read into with the Asgore fight. While it might be easy to assume him destroying the mercy button means he will not show mercy, I think it becomes clear very fast that it's because he won't accept your mercy. He doesn't believe he deserves it. If you talk to Asgore enough times, and you have a low level of violence, his attack and defense drop. If you eat the butterscotch cinnamon pie, his attack and defense also drop as he's reminded of his lost love. If you talk to him upon dying, he nods his head, deeply sad, as if he knows what this means. And it's very likely he does, as there is dialogue in the game suggesting the previous humans had the power to save and load at one point, and simply gave up. Plus the fact that Flowey is able to access multiple save states from the souls. Moreover, Asgore will not kill Frisk until their HP is at 1. He doesn't dodge attacks the way he did against Undyne. He hangs his head and does not speak, This is a man who is clearly trying to hold his emotions in, and it's very likely that he fights not to succeed, but to die. When Asgore's knocked to low HP, he opens up about his intentions and regrets. He reiterates how much his kingdom lost hope once his son died, how his anger prompted his war declaration, and his statement that he'd kill any humans who fell underground, take their souls, become godlike, eradicate humanity, and let monsters rule the surface in peace. While this restored the people's hopes, again, this caused Toriel to leave, and she never returned. Asgore reveals that deep down, he didn't wish to hurt anyone, and that he only wanted his people to have hope again. He is fully aware of his crimes, and wishes to break the cycle of hatred he perpetuated, and offers up his life so that Frisk can safely return to the surface, even if it means leaving his people without a ruler. A lot of people give Asgore grief over the lives he claimed, acting as though he takes pleasure in doing this, when all signs point to him acting to appease his kingdom and trying to prolong it as long as possible in order to give the humans the chance to turn back. What a lot of people forget is that it requires a boss monster soul to leave, so it is possible that some of the humans tried to confront Asgore to go home, but lost so many times they eventually just couldn't continue anymore. This doesn't make Asgore's crimes okay, of course. In the end, 6 lives were taken, and it was entirely his choice. He could have changed his mind, but the fear of disappointing his people and the excitement and pressure upon him weighed so heavily on his shoulders, and so he continued down this dark path for the sake of the future. In the Genocide run, Gerson even mentions how at one point he and Asgore agreed that it was best to give up trying to return to the surface, lest they all be killed again. Gerson felt betrayed when Asgore changed his mind. This further shows that Asgore's decision was one born of grief and impulse, not practicality. If you choose to fight Asgore, he dies with a smile. If you choose mercy, he's shocked, but offers to take care of Frisk and treat them like his own child. There's something I find interesting, however. He mentions his wife and him will care for Frisk, as if Toriel will suddenly come back, but what if that's not it? What if he's lost in a memory, reciting the words he once told Kara when they first met? As if taking in Frisk will fill a void left by his children's deaths so long ago. Regardless, this moment is cut woefully short. Flowey lands a killing blow if you don't kill him yourself, and Asgore crumbles to dust. However, if you replay the Asgore fight later and choose mercy again, under the right circumstances, Flowey will not attack. And so when Asgore makes his speech, he realizes this is just a fantasy, comparing Frisk to Kara and how they have a similar look of hope in their eyes before bringing up the Deltarune prophecy, and how he believes Frisk can fulfill it. He urges Frisk to take his soul, cross the barrier, and find another way to free monsters. He does not give them a choice, as he takes his own life. You can say this is unfair, as he's placing responsibility on a child he just met and making them watch him end his own life. I completely agree. This is not a good choice on his part. Yet the fact that he is so broken that he would rather end his own life than keep another human prisoner shows just how deeply Asgore's actions have crushed him. Deservedly so, perhaps, but this is why so much of the bad faith criticism of Asgore baffles me. When he's boiled down to kid killer, you lose so much of the nuance and tragic nature of his character. This is someone who is kind, caring, and compassionate, and loves children, and still made the terrible choices, because the only other options were to let monsters languish underground with growing concerns of overpopulation and hopelessness creeping back in, take a single soul, cross the barrier, and immediately get 6 more souls. But this is precisely what Kara and Asriel tried, and the humans assumed the worst. To do this would risk another war. Whereas the long game would at least allow what happened with Asriel to fade from human memory. You can certainly argue that letting the human children live out their natural lives would be better, but that would require the humans to want to stay for the rest of their lives. We know so little about the other humans to know if they would have been happy with that. A big part of the tragedy in Undertale is that there was no simple solution. The humans who banished the monsters made it so the barrier could only be broken with soul power, and made it so that a human who falls would have to kill a boss monster to escape. Asgore took 6 young lives, and that isn't okay. But it is possible to understand how he got to this point, especially when you consider the war and how many monsters had likely died in this one-sided battle. And the true tragedy in the neutral runs is how Asgore cannot be saved. No matter what you do, he dies. The souls are lost, and monsters are stuck underground. Even in the most ideal endings, Asgore is deeply missed by those who are close to him, and the future is uncertain. While some endings offer glimmers of hope, it is clear that this is not the perfect finale, which brings us to Pacifist. Asgore is absent for the first stretch of the pacifist portion of the story, although Trilab does shed some light on his relationship with Alphys. He was the one who tasked her to research the soul. He was the one who gave her the dying monster bodies. And if the imperfect pacifist ending is any indication, he did not check up on Alphys during her work very much. He did send her a cute teacup, and he did tell her about the people's complaints, but otherwise, he was pretty hands-off during the experiments. When you approach Asgore after the True Lab, everything seems familiar at first, until Toriel fireballs him off camera in a callback to the first scene with Flowey. Asgore is overjoyed to see Toriel again, but the feeling isn't mutual. She tells him not to call her Tori, and that they are through. And though Asgore asks if they can at least be friends, she says no. He respects this and backs down. Toriel brings up an alternative I briefly touched upon, that he could have taken a single soul, crossed the barrier to get 6 more, and freed their people peacefully. Many people interpret this as being something Toriel wanted, when it's more likely that she's just making a point. Namely, if Asgore really wanted to let monsters free, he could have done this much sooner, but simply couldn't face his people and admit to his own cowardice and regrets. Still, what bothers me about this scene is how much Asgore becomes a punching bag. When Undyne comes in, rather than defend Asgore, the scene instead shifts focus to how Toriel is Asgore's ex, with an Avatar The Last Airbender reference. There are a lot of charming interactions here, but it's just kind of weird how tonally different Asgore is handled here, going from tragic and dignified to basically the butt monkey. And as soon as Toriel and Sans start talking, Asgore bursts into tears, which further hammers in Asgore's role as more of comedic relief. Personally, I'm not super invested in the shipping discourse, and Asgore's openness with his emotions is certainly refreshing to see for a character of his status, but I don't know, it still feels odd for him to shift from this much heavier and more dramatic character to this. Flowey attacks, and everyone's ensnared in vines. They all say hopeful words. Once again, Asgore shows his tendency to place responsibility on others, albeit for good-natured reasons, like instilling hope. His Lost Soul segment further sheds light on his character, too. Forgive me for this. This is my duty. It's clear that these feelings have pushed him forward, even though he did not wish to take these lives or cause so much hurt. This further hammers in the tragic nature of his character. Some people have pointed out how Toriel says that Frisk's future is up to them, while Asgore says that they are the future, and how this is cruel and unfair on Asgore's part. While I do think he has a bad habit of placing a ton of responsibility on others without their consent, I do think he meant well, simply offering inspirational words. Stuff's complicated, yo. After the battle, when Frisk wakes up, Asgore tries to comfort the others as they process what happened and fret over Frisk. He is happy that Frisk is alright and offers some tea, though Toriel tells him to give them some space. Notably, Asgore is one of the only characters in the entire game to apologize to Frisk. While I've seen a few posts giving him grief for retracting that apology, what those people neglect to mention is that Undyne told him not to feel bad because they all tried to kill Frisk, which is pretty messed up. I love Undyne, but it's not like she ever apologized for what she said and did. In fact, the only time Undyne earnestly apologizes is in the neutral ending, and not because of her actions, but for what happened to Asgore. Conversely, only Asgore, Alphys, and Asriel give genuine apologies out of the main cast. Naztapaluk and Muffet if you count side characters. Instead of picking on Asgore, I think it's more telling that Undyne refused to say sorry for chasing Frisk down, threatening to tear their soul from their still-living body, and saying they'd be better off dead. But, I digress. Undyne's flaws do make for a great character regardless, and it shows a bit of a doofy side to Asgore that he took her words so literally. Plus, remember, this isn't a pacifist run. The previous fight you had with Asgore in the neutral ending was completely erased from time, and regardless of any deja vu Asgore might feel, that fight simply didn't happen thanks to Toriel, so ultimately he has a lot less to apologize for, at least to Frisk. In fact, a lot of Asgore's dialogue here is comical in nature. He wants to be pals with Frisk, still wants to make them tea, and would love to go on walks with them. He seems so happy that he can face humanity on happier terms at long last, and even plans to disband the Royal Guard now that they're at peace. He also shows curiosity towards anime and asks Alphys for information, and wants to see it for himself. It's a charming moment that foreshadows his nerdy interest in Deltarune, too. It's also worth noting that when Alphys told the truth, he offered her a comforting hug. Asgore once again shows his tendency to place responsibility on others when asking Frisk to be the ambassador. On one hand, they're probably no older than 13. I personally see them as around 12 or 13 due to the series' Earthbound influence. But on the other hand, they did change the hearts and minds of so many monsters and brought around this new peaceful era. In the end, Asgore won't force it on Frisk, however, and if they decline, Papyrus takes the role. During the credits, we see Asgore tending to the garden outside of Toriel's new school, showing that while they may not be together, they have patched things up enough to be around each other. Even outside of the game, there are still additional bits of Asgore characterization. In the first anniversary Q&A blog, he stated that his second favorite thing to eat is tea and a biscuit. He tries to sound hip, mentioning a life's hack and making tea time epic. Alphys regrets sharing the internet with him after that, but it goes to show that Asgore is desperately trying to get with the times. In the Winter Alarm Clock dialogue, Asgore explains why he loves Santa and how he always calmly laughs and helps everyone feel better. He believes he wasn't a great leader, but does enjoy playing the role of Monster Santa. He even tried going down the chimney once, but got stuck in the process, and the kids drew on his bum. He then reflects on Rudy, a close friend of his who had joined him with a glowing red nose in giving gifts to children. Asgore was Rudy's Santa, and Rudy was Asgore's Rudolph. The way Asgore says this has led many to interpret him as bi, which I think is pretty neat. Asgore seemed to find Rudy's house as a second home, and his family as a second family in the aftermath of Toriel's departure. The two had a long history too, as Asgore had met Rudy during Rudy's university days, but over time, Rudy began looking older than Asgore. One day he fell down, perhaps due to his illness, which might have lacked the proper medical resources that it has in Deltarune. I suggest this over old age simply because Asgore also mentions that Rudy's daughters will get to grow up on the surface, and Sans in the Xbox version of the game talks about an antlered girl. And speaking of the casino, we learn from Sans that one time he did a pun and Asgore just burst into laughter before he could even land any more jokes. Asgore's laughter was so non-stop, in fact, that Sans just stood awkwardly on the stage until they finally closed the curtains on him, but he still considers it his best show. Regardless, Asgore knew Rudy since his youth and watched him get married, become a father, and so much more. This illustrates the tragic nature of being a boss monster, as Gerson reveals in the pacifist epilogue that boss monsters like Asgore only age if they have biological children, or if they are children themselves, if they have biological parents. Asgore has probably outlived many monsters over the centuries, though Rudy's children live on and get to grow up on the surface, as previously mentioned. The rest of his alarm clock scenario is very sweet, as the other monsters come in and celebrate the holiday together. Asgore and Toriel both reflect on how Kara used to fill their water glasses to the brim for efficiency, and Asgore seems to have taken after them in that respect. This shows that Asgore still holds Kara near and dear to his heart. But overall, that's all we have for the Undertale version of Asgore, so with that, let's move on to Deltarune. From the beginning of Deltarune, it's clear that Toriel and Asgore are divorced. There is no sign of him at home, and Toriel makes no mention of him. She seems to be Chris's sole caretaker, and the garbage can is filled with a strangely floral scent. It's not until after the first Dark World adventure that we learn more about him. At the end of Chapter 1, we learn that Asgore frequently gives Alphys bouquets of flowers, and asks how Chris is doing in school. This leads her to wonder if Asgore likes her, though she deflects and claims it's that he likes the comics she lends him. Asgore runs the town's local flower shop, though it seems that since the divorce, he and Chris have fallen out of touch. He's shocked and ecstatic to see them, and pulls them into a huge hug, only to realize that he's not sure if they even like those kind of hugs in the first place. In the shop, you can learn a lot more about this version of Asgore. He collects car magazines. He keeps the flowers from his wedding preserved in glass. He keeps a wedding picture on his fridge, a fridge that has no food besides his pickle, which is worrying on its own. In Chapter 2, we would learn that he goes to Sans specifically for free pickles. But he sleeps on an air mattress and is due for eviction unless he starts paying rent. Seems Asgore has a problem with giving away product for free. When you leave the shop, he gives Chris flowers to give to Toriel and says to keep it a secret. This seems to be a troubling and recurring habit of his, as the garbage in the Dreamer house does have that floral scent I mentioned. He's also given flowers to Rudy before, prompting Rudy to tease Asgore, calling him a fruit, and making Beauty and the Beast references. Asgore's TV has superhero comics on top, while his car contains country music. Toriel later mentions that for one of Asriel's birthdays, Asgore painted a bunch of eggs with green spots as a reference to Yoshi, one of Asriel's favorite video game characters. Unfortunately, the next day Asgore used those same eggs to cook breakfast, and Asriel burst out crying, hating the book Green Eggs and Ham ever since. These are the main things we learn in Chapter 1. But in Chapter 2, we learn that he used to be the police chief before he was forcibly removed for unknown reasons, and that he left huge shoes for Undyne to fill, while the grocery store scene reveals that he's still very awkward in how he interacts with Toriel, offering her flowers again and, once she leaves, asking Sans how to get her to remember how she used to feel. He apparently talks to his flowers a lot, and it's clear that he's still struggling with the divorce. But the problem is that he doesn't respect Toriel's boundaries, and he just expects things to go back the way they used to be. For now, it's hard to say where this will go. Personally, I think Deltarune's Asgore needs to be more respectful of those boundaries. It's understandable that he's heartbroken and wishes for the days when their family was happy. They used to all go to QC's together, and Asgore even brings it up in Chapter 1, suggesting that he can bring Chris and Asriel there like old times. But at the same time, it was really awkward for me to see the interactions with Asgore and Toriel in the store, even though I do feel bad for the dude. The problem is he still butted in on a conversation between two good friends and just shifted the focus about him, kept pushing the flowers on Toriel, and then tried to get Sans to give him romantic advice. I suppose that unlike his Undertale counterpart, the divorce is recent enough that he hasn't accepted it yet, and is still in the bargaining stage. We'll just have to see where the story goes in the future, but I really do hope that he learns to chill out on this front. As some final Deltarune factoids, Asgore is a fan of Mew Mew Kissy Cutie 2, according to Alphys, and he seems to be on friendly terms with Mad Dummy / Mad Mew Mew, as she talks about Asgore in a way that suggests she has a crush on him. And yes, that is the Mad Dummy / Mad Mew Mew ghost, as both she and Mettaton live in the same house. Unfortunately, as I've already alluded to, Asgore is a character who is at the center of a lot of discourse. I don't want to name specific names or use too many screenshots of posts, just because that would be a little disrespectful to the people who made those messages in the past. But regardless, many people hold him so accountable for his crimes that they will go up to fans of the characters just to joke about dead kids, or when people post fan art of him shipped with Toriel, will make divorce jokes without considering that maybe the person doesn't want to hear that. I have seen many people get bullied and harassed on social media simply for enjoying the character, and while he has many fans and staunch defenders, it's still really upsetting to see a game that encourages mercy and compassion bring about this kind of nastiness in the community, even if it's not exclusive to Asgore. And what really bothers me about this is the double standards at play. People will give Asgore all this grief, yet Flowey is a character who has killed just about every monster in many ways just for fun. True, his crimes were undone thanks to the reloads and resets, and he did break the barrier, but the sad truth is that this wouldn't have been possible without those 6 souls. That doesn't make the humans' deaths acceptable either, and Asgore even feels that they aren't, but it's just so strange to me how people give Asriel free pass while they just hammer in on Asgore. I even recall seeing posts saying that Asgore never loved Kara, even though he speaks so fondly of them before he takes his own life. I've seen it argued that Asgore groomed or brainwashed Undyne into hating humans and being a soldier, that she doesn't really want to fight, when Gerson outright states that she loved picking fights even as a little kid. Asgore is not solely to blame for the attitudes towards humanity. There was the war, there are the ancient plaques. By placing all the blame on Asgore, it removes the agency of the individual characters and ignores that this is all part of a larger cycle of hatred, hurt, and loss that finally breaks in the pacifist run. Asgore is fully accountable for his choices, sure, but at the end of the day, the other monsters have their own freedom of choice too. It's okay if you don't like Asgore. It's okay if you don't forgive him for his crimes. There will always be an element of subjectivity when it comes to character preferences, and of course the alternative mindset isn't better. The way some Asgore fans will go on about how hypocritical Toriel is, or how she's just as bad or even worse. Guys, that doesn't solve anything. Both of them are tragic and complex and made bad choices. But I can't help but wonder if the discourse surrounding his character is why he's seen so little merchandise. Photoshop Flowey and Final Boss Asriel both have their own merch, so it can't just be spoilers. Asgore has a poster and appears in the stickers, tarot cards, and on some shirts, but beyond this, he has so little dedicated merch and has been left out of things like the holiday newsletter despite his Santa motifs. It would be wonderful if Asgore fans got a little more merchandise. A figure, a plush, just something simple and fun. There's a small hashtag on social media going around. Hashtag give Asgore some merch. And maybe if enough people signal boost it and perhaps politely tweet at Fangamer, we can see a little bit more love for the big guy. But enough negativity. Before closing things off, I'd like to talk about some cool development trivia. Asgore is a character who had an interesting development history. While his general look was established years before the game released, his finer design details and characterization took some time to develop. Originally, Asgore was intended as a more serious and somber character, taking inspiration from games like Brandish. Early on, it wasn't even decided if he'd have facial hair or not. Check out this bald Asgore over here. He was also originally going to include far more complex attacks, such as spinning his trident, and an attack where he roars. Eventually, Toby took a different turn with Asgore's character, basing his personality on his friend Reed from Fangamer. His hair became blonde for better contrast, and that's how Asgore's final appearance took form. This video ended up longer than I initially expected. I understand that Asgore is always going to be a divisive character, but I do hope that this analysis has given you a bit more appreciation for the complexity of his story and writing, even if you don't forgive his actions or like him as a person. The great thing about Undertale and Deltarune is that the characters are so rich and diverse. There's a character for everyone to enjoy, and ultimately you can't expect everyone to share a universal opinion. I just hope that in the future we see a bit more to him. I'd love to see him develop in Deltarune to find happiness even with the divorce and learn to respect Toriel's boundaries rather than clinging to the past. I'd love to see more merchandise options for him, such as a plushie, and more than anything, I'd love to see the hostility in the fandom surrounding him and Toriel simmer down. Too often people act like if you like one, you can't like the other, or try to oversimplify the actions of Toriel to make Asgore look good, or vice versa, when the whole point is that they are both flawed in their own unique ways. But I digress. Let me know your thoughts on Asgore in the comments, and if you have an Undertale or Deltarune character topic you'd like to see in the future, feel free to mention that, too. I have a lot of video ideas for 2023. Some will take a bit more time in the oven. I'd certainly like to get my thoughts on Ralsei's characterization based on what we know now, for instance. I got some other content outside of Undertale and Deltarune planned too, like a video on Ventus from Kingdom Hearts and the SatAM version of Sonic, so stay tuned in the future. If you like my character analysis and want to check out my Undertale webcomic Inverted Fate, visit the link in the description or on screen right now. Inverted Fate has been going strong since 2016, and we're gearing up for an awesome finale this year, and I hope to upload more music from the comic to this channel soon too, and maybe some more fun behind-the-scenes videos. If you like what I do and want to stay up to date on all my projects, please consider pledging on my Patreon. Every bit of support matters, because I can't always count on YouTube revenue to supplement my Patreon income, and right now I only make enough to cover rent. I want to keep this going as long as I can, so the more I can grow my platform, the better. If you made it this far, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you later.